In recent years, we've come to realize how vulnerable our globalized food system is. COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine have shown a globalized food system and its supply chains are vulnerable to disturbance. In that disturbance, we now recognize that we grow very few crops in very few exporting regions of the world and then transport it along carbon-heavy supply chains to consumers far away from where those crops are being grown. I'm Azam Ali. I'm the CEO of Crops of the Future, which is the global centre dedicated solely to research on underutilized and forgotten crops. The food system is both a cause and a victim of climate change. If we think of cause, it's a major source of carbon emissions. And at the same time, the changes that we're seeing in climate are having impacts on the production of these major staple crops. In the face of these challenges, we've now got to reconsider all of those underutilized and forgotten crops that we've ignored for so long. We've got to look at those as potential crops of the future because many of them are climate resilient. Growing a wider range of crops sounds a great idea. At the end of the day, if we could just diversify the species we grow, but which species should we grow? Which crops should we grow? We actually need a trusted knowledge system that gives us an evidence base on which crops are suitable at any location, what their production would be, what their yield, what their potential nutritional content and what their markets would be. So essentially we really need an evidence base to decide which are the suitable crops under different conditions, under future climates. CFF has developed CropBase as a global knowledge system for underutilized and forgotten crops, and it allows us to provide a trusted evidence base from genetics through to markers across the whole research value chain for, at the moment, over 2,000 crops. Select Crop is an application that includes a geospatial mapping tool so that at any location you can identify the potential yield of underutilized crops compared to the mainstream crops. And indeed what the potential yield would be under different climate scenarios. Once we've used Select Crop to identify the potential yield of any location, we can then use Assess Crop to identify what its nutritional properties are. So once we've got the ingredients, we can say, okay, what's the nutritional content? What are the composition analysis? What the functionality? What products can we make from it? So that we can then identify what the economic and nutritional value of the products will be from the crop that we've identified through Select Crop. The purpose of Assess Crop is to provide a scientific basis from which we can actually make decisions about the products we can make, not just from underutilized crops, but in combination with ingredients from other crops. Or we can rediscover the forgotten foods, the foods of our ancestors, or we can design new foods, novel foods, that we can include ingredients from underutilized crops. That allows us then to make comparisons and identify what the nutritional, economic, and clearly what the consumer preferences are for different forgotten foods. CropBase is being used not just for Assess Crop and Select Crop, but is being used as a knowledge platform for exciting projects such as the EU Radiant project, in which we're identifying potential underutilized crops across the European Union, or the Global Manifesto on Forgotten Foods, which of course is a global effort to raise the interest in the activities around underutilized crops across the world. There's a very narrow range of staple crops that we have now become used to as the mainstream agricultural food systems. We have to be sure if those few mainstream crops will be enough not just to feed 8 billion people, but to nourish 10 billion people on a hotter planet. And if they aren't going to be enough, we've got to re-examine the treasure trove of agricultural biodiversity that already exists amongst these underutilized and forgotten crops. We want CropBase to be a global public good that everybody can contribute to, whether it's forgotten foods and the favorite recipes that their grandmother provided them with, or data from scientific experiments, photographs, or even observations they themselves have on forgotten foods. And we include all of that in this global knowledge system that underpins this diversification in the agricultural and food system, and that allows us to transform agriculture for good. This is really urgent. What we see is generational loss of knowledge on underutilized crops. And each time a generation passes, we lose a whole library of information. Our job now is to make crop-based a resource in which we can collect and put all of that information and make it available to everybody as a global public good. That's why we want everyone to contribute, and it becomes our crop base, everybody's crop base, that they can actually contribute their knowledge, the experience, the recipes, all of the things that we've actually got on these crops that we can actually put into this global knowledge system from which we can make decisions. And what we want crop base to be part of is a global collective effort in which we can actually bring all this information across that value chain to be available to people around the world. Business as usual is no longer an option. We've really got to look for alternatives. We've got to look for alternatives in which we can diversify the range of species and the range of products we can produce from a whole range of underutilized crops that can actually diversify our diets and give us crops that are climate resilient and nutritious in the climates of the future.